Hello, phenomenal story lovers. Get ready for a heartwarming continuation of our tale, where love, family, and unexpected turns of fate prove that the greatest riches are found in the simplest moments. This chapter will fill your heart with joy. Before we dive into this beautiful continuation, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. And if you believe that true happiness is built on shared laughter and genuine connection, hit that like button and subscribe for more uplifting stories. Your support keeps these narratives alive. Leave me alone. Don't you think you've done enough damage? Noah's voice trembled between rage and cold as she clutched the little boy to her chest. Alexander Hayes stood paralyzed in the rain. His 3,000-pound suit was soaking second by second, but he couldn't take his eyes off that woman huddled against the building wall, covered by just an old, damp blanket. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be her. "Noah," he whispered, unable to believe what he saw in her eyes. The meeting with investors had been another success. Champagne, flattery, millions, flowing like water. Then the sudden storm. His chauffeur delayed, and he decided to walk a few blocks to clear his head. And now this. She, like a ghost from the past, returning to collect outstanding debts. "Well, the great Alexander Hayes remembers me," she replied bitterly. What an honor for a homeless woman. The child in her arms stirred restlessly, and for an instant, when the little one opened his eyes, Alexander felt the world stop. He would recognize those eyes anywhere. They were his own, with the same amber tone he had inherited from his paternal grandfather. Who is he?" he asked, his voice choked. Noah covered the child with the edge of the blanket, protecting him from Alexander's penetrating gaze. "No one you care about," she replied, but her eyes betrayed the lie. The rain fell, harder now, forming puddles on the pavement that reflected the city lights like broken mirrors. Alexander approached, instinctively extending his hand. "Come on, let me take you somewhere. It's cold, and the child might get sick." "Now you care?" she laughed bitterly. 3 years too late, Hayes. 3 years! Her eyes, once warm and full of love when they looked at him, now distilled a chilling hatred that contrasted with the fire that had always characterized Noah. Her black hair, once silky and shiny, fell wet and matted over her shoulders. But even so, Alexander thought, she was still beautiful, terribly beautiful. "Please, Noah, whatever happened between us?" "What happened?" She interrupted him, standing up with difficulty while holding the child. "What happened is that you threw me out like a dog when your dear family convinced you that I was only with you for your money. What happened is that you signed those papers without even looking me in the face. What happened is that you didn't answer a single one of my calls when I tried to tell you that I was—" She stopped abruptly, as if she had been about to reveal something she shouldn't. The child began to cry, scared by his mother's raised voice. "Shh, my love. Everything's fine," Noah whispered, rocking him gently. "Mummy's here." Something broke inside Alexander as he heard those words. Mummy's here. And him? Where had he been? "Let me help you," he insisted, taking off his soaked jacket to cover the child. "Just tonight. Tomorrow, you can leave if you want." Noah hesitated. The rain, the cold, Leo's persistent cough over the last few days. She couldn't afford the luxury of pride, not when her son's health was at stake. She remembered the nights in the shelter, where overcrowding made the spread of all kinds of diseases easy. Leo needed a dry, warm place, at least for tonight. "One night," she finally agreed, "and only because he needs it." When Noah tried to pick up the wet blanket from the ground, her fingers momentarily met Alexander's, who had had the same idea. The electricity of that brief contact shook both of them, making them recoil as if they had been burned. 3 years had not been enough to extinguish that fire. Alexander watched Noah walk away a few steps, waiting for him to guide her, as proud as ever, even in misery. The child, who couldn't have been more than 2 years old, looked at him with curiosity from his mother's arms. His eyes, undoubtedly identical to Alexander's, examined him as if trying to decipher who this stranger was who had found them in the rain. And as they walked towards his car, a luxurious Audi that contrasted painfully with Noah's situation, Alexander felt desire, mixed with a burning guilt, ignite again within him. Something told him that this encounter was going to change his life forever. He had to do it right this time. He couldn't let her fall again. "Leo! Leo! Wake up!" Noah's desperate voice cut through the hallway as she gently shook the little boy who was burning with fever. Alexander rushed into the room. The night before, he had managed to get Noah to agree to stay in a small guest house he kept, away from the main mansion and the curious eyes of his family. He never imagined he would find her like this, her face distraught with fear. "What's wrong?" he asked, approaching the bed. "He's not responding well, and he's burning up," she replied without looking at him, focused on the child. "His temperature isn't going below 39. Leo coughed with a harsh sound that chilled Alexander's blood. He remembered finding them in the rain just yesterday, the child exposed to cold and damp for who knows how long. "We have to take him to the hospital," he said firmly, taking the little one in his arms before Noah could protest. "Does he have any medical condition I should know about?" Noah hesitated for an instant, but Leo's well-being came first. "Bronchopulmonary dysplasia," she replied as she frantically searched for her jacket. "He was born premature. His lungs didn't fully develop." Alexander felt his heart clench. That information, given almost with clinical indifference, hid a story of suffering he couldn't even imagine. During the drive, Leo briefly opened his eyes and looked at Alexander with curiosity, despite the fever. "Who are you?" he asked weakly. Alexander felt something break inside him. How to explain to a 2-year-old who he really was? "I'm a friend of your mummy's," he finally replied. "Are you Alex?" "Mummy says that name when she sleeps." Noah looked away towards the window, her cheeks flushed with shame and anger. Alexander held his breath, but said nothing. It wasn't the time. After the hospital visit and a diagnosis of bronchitis, they returned to the house with medications and a recommendation for absolute rest. Leo fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the fever and medications. "Thank you," Noah murmured when they were alone in the living room. "For the hospital." "You don't have to thank me for anything," he replied, pouring her a cup of tea. "It's the least I can do." "The least," she repeated bitterly. "I suppose now you can buy everything, can't you? Medical attention, a temporary home, even your conscience." "Noah, it's not like that." Alexander approached, but she instinctively recoiled. "I just want to help you." "Why? Out of pity? Or out of curiosity about Leo?" The tension between them was almost palpable. 3 years of absence and pain condensed into a small room. "You can stay as long as you need," he said, evading the question. "Leo needs to recover. His condition is not to be taken lightly." 2 weeks, Noah replied. "Just enough time for Leo to get better. Then we'll leave." "Where to?" "Back to the streets, anywhere away from you." The next morning brought an uncomfortable routine. Alexander, accustomed to waking early for his meetings, found himself in the kitchen making coffee when Noah appeared, wrapped only in a towel, her wet hair falling over her shoulders. Evidently, she hadn't expected to find him there. Time seemed to stop. Alexander's eyes involuntarily scanned the silhouette he had caressed so many times. The privations hadn't diminished her beauty. If anything, they had made it more intense, more real. Noah noticed, and instead of fleeing, she met his gaze with defiance, as if daring him to approach. "Enjoying the view, Hayes?" she asked, her voice tense. He didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. The sight of Noah awakened memories he had tried unsuccessfully to bury for 3 years. Entire nights spent exploring that body, learning it by heart. "Good morning to you too, Noah," he finally managed to say, turning his attention back to the coffee. "Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes." She turned and went back to the bedroom, leaving behind the scent of soap and that natural perfume Alexander would recognize among thousands. The following days, they established a pattern. Alexander divided his time between the office and the house, bringing toys for Leo that the child accepted with growing enthusiasm. Noah watched warily as her son grew increasingly attached to Uncle Alex, as he had decided to call him. One afternoon, while Leo was napping, Alexander's phone rang. Seeing the name on the screen, he visibly tensed. "Mother," he replied coldly. "No, I can't attend dinner. I have commitments." "No, it doesn't concern you." He looked at Noah, who was walking down the hallway at that moment, listening to his tone. It was the first time she had heard him speak to his mother, the all-powerful Mrs. Victoria Hayes, like that. "I don't care what Richard thinks," he continued, and at the mention of that name, Noah felt a chill. "I'm not discussing this. No, Mother, it's over." When he hung up, Alexander met Noah's inquisitive gaze. "Richard is still in your life?" It wasn't a question. "He's a partner in some businesses," he replied cautiously. "But I keep my distance." Noah nodded slowly. "Your mother never changed, did she? Still trying to control you?" "She tries," he replied with a half-smile. "But I'm not the same idiot who let himself be manipulated." That night, while Leo slept, the tension finally erupted. "Stop buying him with gifts," Noah snapped when Alexander came in with a new storybook. "You have no right to just appear in his life as if nothing happened. And you have the right to hide him from me," he retorted, losing his composure for the first time. "Because he's mine, isn't he? Don't take me for an idiot, Noah. He has my eyes, my smile. He even twists his mouth like my father does when he's thinking." Noah approached, furious, and pushed him with both hands. "Don't talk about what you don't know. You threw me out. You signed those damned papers to get me out of your life." Alexander grabbed her wrists, pulling her face close to his. "Because I believed you had betrayed me. Because I was young and stupid, and I trusted my family more than the woman I loved." They were so close they could feel each other's breath. Rage, desire, pain, all mixed in a whirlwind of emotions. "The one you loved?" she whispered, her voice breaking. In the past, for an instant, it seemed they were about to kiss. Their lips sought each other, guided by a force beyond reason. But at the last second, Noah turned her face. "I'm going to check on Leo," she murmured, freeing herself from his grasp. "He has a fever again." Alexander watched her walk away, feeling his heart pounding. It was the first time he had admitted aloud what he had felt for her. What he still felt. That night, as he watched through the half-open door as Noah watched over Leo's sleep, Alexander made a decision. He would discover the truth about what had happened 3 years ago, and if he had indeed made the mistake he suspected, he would do the impossible to repair it. Because this time, he wouldn't let them go. "My dear, can you believe what's happening between these two? I'd love to know what you think of this story so far." "Where are you watching it from?" "Perhaps you're in bed, tired after a long day. Or maybe you're on public transport on your way home. You know, every time I upload a chapter of these stories, I imagine your reaction. Your emotions. I wonder if you got as angry as I did with Alexander for what he did to Noah, or if you understand why she can't forgive him so easily. Leave me a comment telling me where you're watching this from, and what you think will happen in the next chapter. Do you think Leo will get better? Do you think Alexander has really changed? I read absolutely all your comments, and I always reply. Your opinion means a lot to me. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like it, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any chapters. And now, shall we continue with this story of love, forgiveness, and second chances? The cardiac monitor emitted a constant rhythmic beep that marked time in that hospital room. Leo slept connected to wires and an IV, his little chest rising and falling with difficulty. His bronchitis had complicated into pneumonia. Bronchopulmonary dysplasia with superimposed pneumonia, explained Dr. Johnson, a kind but worried pediatric pulmonologist. It's a serious condition in children who were born prematurely. His lungs didn't fully develop and are more vulnerable to infections. Noah remained seated by the bed, her eyes red from crying and exhaustion. She hadn't left the boy's side since they were admitted urgently the night before, when Leo's fever reached 40 degrees and his breathing became alarmingly shallow. "You should rest a little," Alexander said, entering with 2 coffees. "I'll stay with him. I won't leave him," she replied, but accepted the coffee with a gesture of gratitude. Alexander pulled up another chair and sat beside her. The silence between them, interrupted only by the beeping of the machines, was strangely intimate. They had spent the entire night in the emergency room, watching the doctors fight to stabilize Leo. In those endless hours, reproaches had taken a back seat, replaced by a shared fear. "Do you remember that night on the beach?" Noah asked suddenly, her gaze lost in the window. "When we escaped from the hotel and slept under the stars?" Alexander nodded, surprised by that unexpected memory. It had been during their trip to Brighton, far from his family's influence. 3 perfect weeks that now seemed to belong to another life. "You said you had never seen so many stars together," he murmured, "that you could touch them if you stretched out your hand." That night, Noah's voice trembled. "That night we conceived Leo." Time seemed to stop. Alexander felt breathless. Although he had suspected it from the first moment, hearing it confirmed by her was completely different. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," she replied bitterly. "I called you for weeks after I was thrown out, but you never answered." Guilt, that feeling that had accompanied him since he saw her again, intensified to become unbearable. He vaguely remembered those calls, all from an unknown number, which he had ignored, believing it was Noah trying to manipulate him to come back. His mother had been in charge of planting that idea in his head. "The last night," he began, his voice choked. "The last time we were together. Did you already know?" Noah shook her head. "I found out 2 weeks later, when I was already on the streets." Alexander closed his eyes, reliving that last night. It had been perfect. He had kissed her as if it were the first time, exploring every inch of her skin. His hands, always sure, had trembled as he undressed her, and she had whispered his name between moans, digging her nails into his back. A week later, his mother had shown him proof that Noah was cheating on him with Richard, his business partner. Manipulated photos, as he would discover years later when Richard himself, in a moment of drunkenness, had admitted the truth. But at that moment, young and stupid, he had believed her. "I never stopped thinking about you," he confessed, looking directly into her eyes. "Not a single day." Noah looked at him, pain and longing mixed in her pupils. Alexander brought his hand to her cheek, brushing it with the back of his fingers. She didn't pull away. "I hated you so much," Noah whispered, as a tear rolled down her cheek. But I could never tear you out of here," she added, putting a hand to her chest. Their faces slowly approached, as if drawn by an invisible force. When their lips met, it was as if time had not passed. A kiss, salty with tears, laden with pain and repressed desire. Alexander pulled her closer, seating her on his lap as he deepened the kiss. His hands explored Noah's waist, rising to brush the curve of her breasts over her clothes. "I want to protect you," he murmured against her lips. "You and Leo, let me do it, please." Noah responded by intensifying the kiss, tangling her fingers in his hair. For a moment, they surrendered to the desire that still burned between them, forgetting where they were, forgetting the past. But when Alexander's hands began to slide under her blouse, Noah pulled away abruptly, as if waking from a trance. "No," she said, standing up. "I can't do this. Not again." "Noah, please, you don't understand what I went through," he exclaimed, immediately lowering his voice as he remembered Leo. "You have no idea what it's like to have everything snatched away from you from one day to the next. To have the person you love look at you like a liar, like an opportunist." Alexander approached, but she recoiled. "Do you know what your mother told me when she ordered me out?" Noah continued, her voice breaking. "That they had investigated me, that they knew I came from a poor family, that my father had been in jail, that I was a gold digger like all the others. And then Richard, your dear friend, had the audacity to offer me help if I agreed to sleep with him." Alexander's face darkened, the missing piece of the puzzle. "Richard," he murmured, rage building within him. "He and my mother planned everything. I swear I knew nothing about it," he continued, approaching her again. "No. And why did you sign the eviction order?" "I have a copy, Alexander. Your signature is there." The memory hit Alexander like a punch. That day, enraged by the supposed proof of betrayal, he had signed several documents his mother had presented to him without reading them. "Company matters that need your urgent attention," she had said. "I signed many papers that day," he admitted with shame. He was blinded by jealousy, by rage. "My mother showed me some photos." "Did they show you with Richard?" "Richard?" Noah let out a bitter laugh. "The man who constantly harassed me and whom I rejected so many times? Your mother's close friend?" The revelation struck Alexander like a blow. All the pieces were beginning to fall into place. His mother, obsessed with him marrying someone from his class. Richard, always eager to please her, intent on getting rid of Noah to have a clear path to the Hayes companies through Alexander. "I'm going to tell you the truth," Noah said, sitting down again. "The whole truth. And then you'll decide if you want to remain part of our lives." Leo's monitor emitted a sudden alarm. The child stirred in his sleep, his breathing more labored than before. A doctor and 2 nurses rushed into the room. "You have to leave," one of the nurses ordered, while the doctor examined the little one. In the hallway, Alexander held Noah when her legs faltered. He held her against his chest as she trembled with fear. And in that embrace, in the midst of shared terror, both felt something rebuilding between them. A silent promise. This time, they would face whatever came together. The hospital waiting room had become their personal purgatory. 3 hours had passed since the doctors stabilized Leo, but Alexander hadn't been able to speak with Noah. She had locked herself in the room with the child, refusing to leave him alone for another second, unable to stay still. Alexander made a decision. He dialed a number on his phone. "Charles, I need you to investigate something immediately," he ordered as soon as he answered. "Noah Hayes' dismissal from the Hayes mansion 3 years ago. I want to know who gave the order, what documents were signed, and especially, I need to speak with whoever made me sign those papers." The answer on the other end of the line was brief. "I'll be in your office in an hour, sir." 2 hours later, Alexander stared at Edward Jones, the former head of staff at the mansion, now retired. The man, visibly uncomfortable, avoided his gaze. "Your mother insisted it was a matter of security, Mr. Hayes," the man explained, nervously fiddling with a folder. "She said Miss Hayes had been investigated and represented a danger to the family. And I signed her expulsion without reading it?" Alexander slammed his fist on the desk. "How did you allow that, Edward?" The man swallowed hard. "You were agitated that day. You signed several documents without looking at them. When Miss Hayes tried to speak with you, your mother had already given instructions not to let her pass under any circumstances. And no one thought to question her?" Fury burned inside Alexander. "No one thought that perhaps my mother was manipulating me?" Edward looked down. "Your mother threatened to fire anyone who interfered, and Miss Hayes hesitated for an instant. She left without making a fuss when she was shown the document with your signature. She only asked to speak with you one last time, but your mother had already made sure you were out of town." Alexander ran his hands over his face, unable to contain his frustration. "Why are you coming back with this now?" Edward asked curiously. "It's been 3 years." "Because I found her," he replied, his voice breaking as he added, "her and my son." Edward paled. "Your son," he murmured. "My God, we didn't know. Mrs. Hayes told us that Miss Hayes just wanted to trap you with a fake pregnancy." Alexander felt his blood boil. "My mother knew Noah was pregnant," he said, more to himself than to Edward. "That's why she hurried to get her out of my life." "I'm so sorry, sir," Edward murmured, ashamed. "Many of us suspected something wasn't right, but no one dared to question her. And that man, Richard Miller, always hovering around, always talking to your mother privately." "Richard," Alexander spat. "I need to talk to him too." Edward shifted uncomfortably. "Be careful, sir. Mr. Miller has influence on the board of Hayes Corp. He's been persuading several members to question your leadership." Alexander smiled humorlessly. "Let him try. We'll see who falls first." Back at the hospital, Alexander felt every piece of the puzzle falling perfectly into place. His mother, obsessed with the family's good name. Richard, always eager to please her, with his sights set on controlling the Hayes companies. The manipulated photos, all to separate him from the only woman he had ever truly loved. When he entered the room, he found Noah dozing in the chair next to Leo's bed. The child was breathing more easily, and color had returned to his cheeks. Alexander approached silently and gently kissed the little one's forehead. "He's just like you when you sleep," Noah whispered, startling him. "I thought you were asleep," he replied, turning to her. "I was just resting my eyes," she smiled faintly. "The doctors say he's responding well to treatment. They've reduced the oxygen dosage." Alexander nodded, sitting opposite her. Noah's face showed signs of exhaustion, but also a strength he had always admired in her. "We need to talk, Noah," Alexander finally said. She sighed, as if she had been dreading that moment. "I know, but not here." She gestured to Leo with her head. In the hallway, once outside, Alexander spoke first. "I went to see Edward, the former head of staff." Noah visibly tensed. "Why?" "Because I needed to know the truth," he replied, approaching her. "I needed to confirm what I already suspected, that I was an idiot manipulated by my mother and Richard." Noah's eyes filled with tears. "Edward knew everything," he continued. "He knew my mother expelled you, that Richard was involved. He even knew you tried to talk to me about your pregnancy." Noah hugged herself, as if protecting herself from painful memories. "And now what? Do you think you can show up after 3 years and fix everything with an apology?" "No," he said, his voice firm but soft. "I know it will take a lifetime to repair what I did. But for Leo, for you, I'm willing to try every day I have left." "And what about Richard?" she asked. "And your mother? Do you think they'll leave us alone?" Alexander took her hands in his. "I'm going to confront them, both of them, and this time I won't be fooled." Noah pushed him with both hands, the accumulated rage of 3 years erupting like a volcano. "You have no idea. You don't know what it's like to sleep in shelters, to have to beg to feed your child." Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. "While you were still living your perfect life?" Alexander grabbed her wrists when she tried to push him again. "My life has been hell without you," he exclaimed, pulling her closer. "Every single day I've thought of you, dreamed of you, hated myself for letting you go. Just let go of me," she demanded, but her voice lacked conviction. Their faces were so close they could feel each other's breath. The tension between them, that electricity that had always existed, crackled like a high-tension cable. "Never again," he whispered just before kissing her. It was a kiss born of desperation, of shared pain, but also of desire that had never died. Noah fought him for only an instant before surrendering, responding with the same intensity, biting his lower lip almost in rage. Alexander pushed her against the wall, lifting her effortlessly. She wrapped her legs around his waist, tangling her fingers in his hair, pulling him close. There was no tenderness in that encounter, only unbridled passion after years of absence. "I hate you," she murmured between kisses. "I hate you so much." "I know," he replied, kissing her neck, sliding his hands under her blouse. "I know." In a flash of clarity, Alexander remembered where they were. He picked her up and, without breaking the kiss, carried her to a small family lounge down the hall. He closed the door with his foot and laid her on the sofa. Their clothes began to fall away. Noah unbuttoned his shirt with impatient fingers, scratching his chest, marking him as her own. He slid his hands down her thighs, lifting her skirt, rediscovering every curve of her body. "Noah," he groaned against her skin. "I've missed you so much." There were no more words, only the sound of their ragged breaths, of skin against skin, of promises whispered between muffled moans. Hours later, as the first rays of sun filtered through the window, they remained tangled on the sofa, covered only by his jacket. "What are we going to do now?" Noah asked, her head resting on his chest. Alexander gently stroked her bare back. "What we should have done 3 years ago," he replied. "Be together, raise our son, face whoever tries to separate us." Noah sat up on one elbow to look him in the eyes. "It won't be easy. Your mother, my mother will have to accept it or lose me forever," he interrupted, "and Richard will regret messing with us." Noah bit her lower lip, doubting. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Alexander took her face in his hands, wiping away a tear with his thumb. "Then let me prove it to you every day," he whispered. "Let me earn your trust again." She didn't respond with words. Instead, she kissed him softly, a kiss different from the passionate ones of hours before, a kiss that tasted of a new beginning. The sound of his phone interrupted them. It was Leo's doctor. "Your son is awake and asking for you," the voice on the other end of the line informed him. Alexander looked at Noah with a silent question in his eyes. She nodded, intertwining her fingers with his. "Let's go together," she said, and for the first time in 3 years, she smiled unreservedly. Optimism lasted exactly 3 days. 3 days in which Leo seemed to improve, in which Alexander and Noah rediscovered their connection between medical visits and nightly conversations. 3 days that ended abruptly when the fever returned with more force. "We need to do more tests," explained Dr. Johnson, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the history. "The pneumonia is resisting the initial antibiotic treatment. Cultures show a more resistant bacterium than we thought." Noah squeezed Alexander's hand, who had remained by her side day and night since their reconciliation. "What does that mean?" she asked in a trembling voice. "It means we're going to change the antibiotic and perform some additional tests," the doctor replied cautiously. "His bronchopulmonary dysplasia complicates the picture. We need to be more aggressive with the treatment, but also more careful due to his underlying condition. I don't want to alarm you, but we need to rule out complications like pleural effusion or lung abscess." When the doctor left, Noah collapsed into the chair next to the bed where Leo slept, connected to more machines than before. His breathing was labored, interrupted by fits of coughing that shook his small body. "This can't be happening," she whispered, tears silently sliding down her cheeks. "Noah, him." Alexander knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "He's going to recover," he affirmed with a conviction he didn't feel. "He's strong, like his mother." Noah stared at him, her eyes red from crying and exhaustion. "I've never told you this, but when he was born, I almost lost him." The confession hit Alexander like a punch. "What?" "It was a complicated birth," she continued, her gaze lost in memories. "I was alone, with no money for a decent hospital. An NGO helped me, but there were complications. He was born at 32 weeks, weighing only 1,100 grams. Alexander closed his eyes, feeling every word pierce him like a knife. "Why is he so vulnerable to infections?" he asked, though he had already connected the dots. "He was in the NICU for 2 months, she continued. "The doctors said his lungs didn't fully develop, that it would always be like this, more vulnerable to respiratory infections. Bronchopulmonary dysplasia is common in prematures, but his was severe." Her shoulders shook with a sob. "I should have taken better care of him. Not stayed on the streets when they kicked us out of the last shelter, no. It's not your fault," Alexander interrupted firmly. "You did the impossible for him under terrible circumstances. The fault is mine for not being there, for not looking for you, for being so stupid." A faint groan from the bed interrupted his self-flagellation. Leo stirred, trapped in a feverish nightmare. Both approached immediately. Noah caressed his burning forehead, while Alexander pressed the button to call the nurse. "Mommy," the child murmured, without opening his eyes. "Mommy, it hurts." "I'm here, my love," Noah whispered, her voice broken by helplessness. "Mummy's here." Leo briefly opened his eyes. His unfocused gaze swept the room until it stopped on Alexander. "Uncle Alex?" he asked weakly. "Are you staying too?" Something broke inside Alexander. He took the child's small hand in his, unable to contain his tears. "I'm not going anywhere, champ," he promised. The nurse entered, followed by 2 doctors, who quickly checked the monitors and adjusted the medication. Alexander and Noah were relegated to a corner of the room as the team worked. "His saturation is dropping," one of the doctors said. "We need to intubate him. The CT scan shows fluid in the pleural space. Confirmed. Parapneumonic effusion." Noah stifled a scream, covering her mouth with her hands. Alexander hugged her tightly as the doctors prepared the procedure. "You have to leave," the nurse ordered with firm kindness. "We'll let you know as soon as we're done." In the hallway, Noah collapsed against the wall, unable to stand. "I can't lose him," she sobbed. "He's all I have." "We're not going to lose him," Alexander replied, kneeling in front of her. "I swear it, Noah. I won't allow it." She looked up, finding fierce determination in his eyes. "He's your son," she finally said, the words she had kept for so long. "Leo is your son, Alexander." Although he already knew it, although he had seen it in the child's eyes from the first moment, hearing it from Noah's lips hit him with full force. He was a father. He had a son fighting for his life a few meters away, a son he barely knew. Without saying anything, Alexander stood up and walked to the hospital chapel. He wasn't a religious man, but at that moment, he needed something to hold on to. Noah followed him in silence. The small chapel was empty. Alexander fell to his knees in front of the altar, tears streaming freely down his face. He didn't pray with words, but with an open heart, pleading for the life of the child he had just discovered was his. Noah knelt beside him, taking his hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you sooner. I should have looked for you when I found out I was pregnant." Alexander shook his head. "No, I should have looked for you. I should have listened to you." His voice broke. "I'm his father, and I wasn't even there when he was born, when he was in the NICU, when he took his first steps." They embraced in silence, sharing the pain and regret, but also the hope, because despite everything, they had found each other again. And this time, they would fight together. When they returned to the waiting room, Dr. Johnson was waiting for them with a grave expression. "We've stabilized Leo," he reported, "but we need your consent for a more invasive procedure. His lungs are very compromised." Noah looked at Alexander, seeking support in his eyes. "What procedure?" he asked, his voice firm despite the fear. "A thoracentesis," the doctor explained. "We need to drain the fluid that's accumulating in his pleural space. It's an ultrasound-guided procedure where we insert a fine needle between the ribs to extract the fluid. In addition, we'll need to place a chest tube if the fluid continues to accumulate. Is it dangerous?" Noah's voice was barely audible. "Every procedure has risks," the doctor replied honestly. "But at this moment, it's his best option. The fluid is compressing his lung, making his already compromised breathing even more difficult." Alexander took Noah's hand in his. "We are his parents," he declared firmly. "Both of us. And we trust your judgment, doctor." The doctor nodded, surprised by the change in the family situation he had observed for days. "I'll sign the papers," Alexander added. "And I want to bring in a second opinion. A Mayo Clinic specialist I know will be at my expense, but I want the best for my son." As they completed the paperwork, Noah watched him with a mix of gratitude and awe. "Thank you," she simply said. "Don't thank me for doing what I should have done 3 years ago," he replied. "I promise you that from now on, I will be here. For him. For you." The following hours were the longest of their lives. The procedure was completely successful, extracting over 60 milliliters of purulent fluid, which confirmed the suspicion of emphysema. Leo remained intubated, on broad-spectrum antibiotics, and with the chest tube in place. They were allowed to see him briefly before he was transferred to pediatric intensive care. Alexander entered first, trembling at the sight of his son, so small and fragile among tubes and machines. He took his hand with infinite delicacy and leaned in to whisper in his ear. "I'm your dad, Leo," he said, his voice trembling. "And I promise I'm going to take care of you always. Don't give up, champ. We're waiting for you." When he looked up, he saw Noah in the doorway, watching them with tears in her eyes. For the first time since they had reunited, he saw in her gaze something more than pain or distrust. He saw hope, the hope that perhaps she would never have to face life alone again. The spring sun illuminated the garden of the small house on the outskirts of London. 3 months had passed since those agonizing days in the hospital. Leo played among the flowers, chasing a butterfly with his clear laughter, filling the air. His recovery had been slow, but steady. And although they still attended regular respiratory therapy and medical checkups, the worst was behind them. Noah watched him from the terrace, a cup of coffee in her hands, and a serene smile on her face. Her life had changed so much in so little time that sometimes she feared waking up and finding herself back on the streets, fighting to survive. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, appearing behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. How lucky we are, she replied, leaning against his chest. How life can change when you least expect it. Alexander gently kissed her neck, sending shivers down her spine. I'll never stop thanking fate for putting you back in my path, he murmured against her skin. After 2 weeks in the hospital, they had been discharged with a strict regimen of care and medications. Alexander had set up this house for them, away from the family mansion and his mother's toxic influence. He had hired the best pediatric pulmonologists, and thanks to intensive and personalized treatment, Leo was improving day by day. The confrontation with Victoria Hayes had been inevitable and explosive. When Alexander told her that Noah and Leo would live with him, that he would publicly recognize his son, and that he would not tolerate any more manipulation, the woman had flown into a rage. I warn you, Alexander, his mother had threatened. If you insist on that woman, forget about your inheritance. I will not allow that gold digger and her bastard to bear the Hayes name. You can keep all the money, Mother, he had replied with a calmness that surprised everyone. I already have the only thing that truly matters to me, and as for Leo, he will not only bear my name, but he will be the legitimate heir to everything I have built myself. Victoria had paled at her son's determination, seeing the control she had exerted for years vanish. Richard will destroy you, she had replied in a last attempt at manipulation. He already has the board practically in his pocket. Let him try, Alexander had smiled. He'll be too busy defending himself from the charges of fraud and manipulation I'm preparing against him. And indeed, Richard Miller had fallen like a house of cards just a week later, when evidence of his embezzlement of funds and manipulation of business documents came to light. It had been Edward Jones who, regretting his silence for years, had provided the key information to bring down the corrupt partner. That day, returning home, Noah had greeted him with a mix of concern and admiration. Are you sure of what you did? She had asked. Your mother could leave you with nothing. Alexander had simply smiled, gently kissing her. I have more money than we could spend in several lifetimes, Noah. Investments, properties, businesses I've built on my own. I don't need my mother's fortune or her approval. Days had turned into weeks, weeks into months. Little by little, they had built a routine, learning to be a family. Leo, with the adaptability typical of children, had accepted Alexander with surprising naturalness. At first, there were questions. Why didn't you come before? Or, why was Mummy sad when she talked about you? Questions they had answered with simplified truths, appropriate for his age. Over time, Leo had started calling him Dad. First timidly, then with a naturalness that melted Alexander's heart every time. Noah had found work at a local clinic, using her nursing training that she had never been able to fully practice. She had discovered that her personal experience with Leo's illness made her a particularly empathetic professional with parents of children with chronic illnesses. Alexander managed his businesses from home most of the time, prioritizing being present for Leo and her. After the conflict with his mother and Richard, he had restructured his companies, moving away from Hayes Corp. And strengthening his own projects. Not everything had been perfect. Noah's nightmares about the difficult times persisted. Sometimes, Alexander would wake her when he heard her crying in her sleep, and he would hug her until she fell back asleep. Other times, their insecurities caused arguments that ended in passionate reconciliations. Dad, look what I found! The little boy ran towards them with something in his hands. Alexander knelt down to his height, marveling every day at the miracle his son was. The same eyes, the same smile, gestures he recognized as his own. It was like seeing himself as a child, but with the vitality and sweetness he had inherited from Noah. What do you have there, champ? He asked curiously. Leo opened his hands, revealing a small green frog. "Can we keep it?" he pleaded with those eyes to which Alexander found it impossible to deny anything. "I'll put air in its box so it can breathe well, like me." That innocent reference to his illness moved both parents. Leo had learned to live with his limitations, integrating them into his life with astonishing naturalness. Noah laughed, shaking her head. "I think he'll be happier here in the garden, darling," she explained sweetly. "This is his home, like this house is ours." The boy seemed to consider the answer seriously. "And will we always live here?" he asked, looking alternately at his parents. "Will we never go back to the streets?" The innocent question, yet laden with fear, made Noah's heart clench. Alexander intervened, taking the child in his arms. "Never again, Leo," he promised firmly. "This is our home now. We'll always be together." Leo smiled, seemingly satisfied with the answer, and asked to be put down to return the frog to the garden. When he ran off, Noah turned to Alexander, emotion shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, caressing his cheek. "For giving us this, for keeping your promise." Alexander pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I've been thinking," he began with some hesitation. "Perhaps it's time to make this official." Noah looked at him, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Alexander took a breath and led her to the garden, where Leo was still playing. Taking her by the waist, he kissed her softly on the lips, before leaning his head in to whisper in her ear, "I want to start over, but with you in my bed, at my table, in my life. Truly, forever." Noah's heart raced as she understood his words. Her eyes filled with tears as a smile spread across her face. "You're asking me what I think you're asking me." Alexander nodded, pulling a small box from his trouser pocket. "I've been carrying it with me for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment," he confessed, "and I've realized that any moment with you is perfect." Before he could open the box, Leo appeared running and stopped in front of them, observing them with curiosity. "Why are you crying, Mummy?" he asked worriedly. "Because I'm very happy, my love," she replied, bending down to hug him. Leo looked at the box in his father's hands, and then at his mother, an expression of understanding illuminating his childish face. "Dad! Mom! She's blushing!" he exclaimed with a mischievous laugh. Alexander laughed too, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. "It's because I'm asking her if she wants to marry me," he explained simply, "so we can be an official family." Leo's eyes widened. "Then we'll be a real family?" he asked innocently. "Like my friends who have a mom and dad in the same house?" "We already are a real family, darling," Noah replied, looking at Alexander with love. "But yes, if your dad insists so much, I suppose we can make it official." Alexander's smile illuminated his face as he opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant gold ring with a small diamond. "Is that a yes?" Noah nodded, extending her hand for him to slide the ring onto her finger. "It's a yes," she confirmed, before kissing him softly. Leo applauded excitedly, jumping around them. Alexander lifted him with one arm while hugging Noah with the other. Together, as the family they were always meant to be. That night, after putting Leo to bed, who had insisted that both of them read him a story, Alexander found Noah on the terrace, contemplating the stars. He approached silently and hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Do you remember that night on the beach?" he asked, evoking the moment he had mentioned in the hospital. "When you said you could touch the stars?" Noah smiled, leaning back against him. "Now I can touch them again," she replied, raising her hand where the ring shone. "Because I have everything I ever dreamed of." Alexander turned her in his arms to look her in the eyes. In them, He saw everything they had overcome: the pain, the separation, the reunion, the reconciliation, and now, the promise of a future. Together. In the distance, they heard Leo's soft cough, a reminder that their son would always require special care, but they would no longer face those challenges separately. "This time I won't let you fall," he promised, sealing his vow with a kiss under the starry spring sky. Noah responded to his kiss with all the passion and love she had kept for 3 years of solitude. The past was behind them, and the future, bright as the stars above them, was just beginning.